Rain hammered relentlessly against the bus windows, blurring the world into streaks of gray and silver. The wipers squeaked across the glass, struggling to keep up as the old bus rattled along the narrow mountain road. Inside, passengers huddled quietly, their breath fogging the air, their faces weary after hours of travel. Somewhere near the middle sat Arav, his hands clenched around the straps of his worn backpack, knuckles pale. He hated long trips, especially ones that took him through the mountains. The winding roads, the steep drops, the unpredictable weather, they made his heart race in ways he couldn't control. He tried to distract himself by focusing on the rhythmic hum of the engine, the chatter of an old couple across the aisle, the soft lullaby of a mother soothing her little girl. Yet beneath it all, fear lingered, a quiet tremor in his chest. He remembered his mother's voice when he had left home that morning. "The world is not kind to those who hide from it, Arav. You have to learn to face it." He had nodded then, smiling faintly, but deep down he knew courage was something he had never truly understood. Outside, thunder rolled through the valley, echoing like a warning. The bus groaned as it climbed higher, its headlights slicing through sheets of rain. Arav leaned his forehead against the cool glass, trying to calm his nerves. He watched the mist swirl over the cliffs, hiding the abyss just a few feet from the road's edge. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the faces around him, tired, indifferent, unaware of what was coming. Then, in the next instant, the world lurched. The driver shouted something, a curse or a prayer, and slammed the brakes. Tires screamed against the slick asphalt. Luggage tumbled from the overhead racks. The old woman beside Arav gasped, clutching her seat. And then came the moment of weightlessness, the sickening feeling of the bus sliding sideways. The sound was deafening, metal scraping, glass shattering, people screaming. Arav's shoulder slammed into the window, pain bursting down his arm as the bus careened off the road and into darkness. When the motion finally stopped, everything was wrong. The bus lay on its side, tilted awkwardly against a slope. The windows were shattered, the smell of oil thick in the air. For a moment, there was only silence, heavy and unreal. Then came the moans, the cries for help, the confusion. Arav blinked, disoriented, his ears ringing. A shard of glass had cut his arm, and warm blood soaked through his sleeve. His seatbelt had jammed tight across his chest, trapping him. He fumbled for the latch, his fingers trembling, until it finally released with a snap. He dropped awkwardly to the side of the bus, now the floor. Panic surged through him. He couldn't think clearly, his mind screamed for him to get out, to run, to escape before the bus exploded like in the movies. He crawled toward the nearest broken window, his breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. Then he froze. Somewhere behind him, a soft voice whimpered, "Mama, Mama." He turned his head. Toward the back of the bus, where seats had crumpled together like paper, he saw a small hand reaching through twisted metal. The little girl who had been sitting with her mother was trapped, her dark eyes wide with terror. Arav hesitated. Fear gripped him again, his muscles stiff, his throat dry. What if the bus caught fire? What if he got trapped too? His heart pounded so hard it hurt. But then she cried again, and that sound, so small, so helpless, cut through everything. He didn't think after that. He just moved. Crawling over broken glass and twisted seats, he made his way toward her. His knees scraped against the floor, his hand brushed over spilled blood, he didn't know whose, but he kept going. The closer he got, the stronger the smell of gasoline became. Sparks flickered from a broken wire overhead, casting flashes of blue light across the wreckage. When he reached the girl, he saw that her leg was caught under a bent steel bar. Her little hands clung to the edge of the seat, trembling. "It's okay," he said, his voice shaking. "I'm going to help you." She looked at him, eyes full of tears, and whispered, "I can't move." Arav swallowed hard, his mind racing. He grabbed the metal bar and tried to lift it, but it wouldn't budge. He pressed harder, pain shooting up his injured arm, but still nothing. His strength was fading, his body screaming to stop. Yet he remembered his mother's words, "Fear will never let you live," and he gritted his teeth. One more time, he whispered to himself. He shifted his position, wedged his shoulder under the bent frame, and pushed with every ounce of strength he had left. The metal groaned, shifted slightly, and finally gave way. He pulled the girl free and wrapped her in his jacket. She was shaking, but she managed to whisper a faint, "Thank you." Arav didn't answer. His lungs burned, His arms ached, but there was no time to rest. He glanced around. The other passengers were still trapped, some conscious, some not. He saw the old woman near the front, blood on her forehead, trying to move. He called out to her, urging her toward the opening he had come through. Then someone shouted from outside, "The fuel tank is leaking. Get out now." A wave of panic swept through the survivors. Arav climbed up toward the broken window, holding the child tight. Rain poured in, cold and relentless, washing the blood from his skin. He hoisted her up first, handing her to a man who had climbed down from the road above. Then he turned back, helping others toward the exit. Every time someone stumbled, he pulled them up. Every time someone froze, he shouted, "You can do it, come on." His voice cracked, but he kept going. By the time the last person climbed out, his legs felt like stone. He pulled himself through the window and fell onto the muddy slope, gasping for air. He looked back at the bus, dark, broken, silent except for the hiss of escaping fuel. Rain pounded his face, but he didn't care. The little girl was sitting nearby, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her. She looked at him, eyes wide, and whispered again, "You saved me." Arav stared at her, unable to speak. His entire body trembled, not from cold, but from the enormity of what had just happened. He had been terrified, convinced he couldn't do anything. Yet in that moment, when fear was at its strongest, something inside him had changed. He realized courage wasn't about not being afraid, it was about moving forward even when you were. Hours later, as rescue workers arrived and helped the injured, Arav sat beneath a tree, the child asleep in his lap. The world was still wet and dark, but inside him, a quiet light had begun to glow. He had been thrown into fear, yes, but somewhere in that chaos, he had found the strength to rise. The morning sun spilled over the valley, washing the fields and rooftops in gold. Birds called from distant trees, and the air smelled faintly of earth after rain. Arav stood outside the small rescue center in his town, tying the laces of his heavy boots. The uniform still felt strange on him, the bright red vest, the sturdy gloves, but it carried a quiet weight that made him proud. He looked at his reflection in the window for a moment and saw someone different from the boy who used to tremble at shadows. The faint scar on his arm, left by the crash months ago, was a reminder of the night his life had changed. Every morning, he arrived early, helping check the rescue van, clean the stretchers, and organize supplies. The others called him, the calm one, though he never felt calm inside. There were still nights when he woke up gasping, his heart pounding as the memory of the crash returned, the screech of metal, the little girl's cry. But instead of letting the fear consume him, he used it. It reminded him why he was here, to help those who couldn't help themselves, to be the hand that reached through the darkness like someone once had for him. His mentor, Rajesh, an older man with a grizzled beard and kind eyes, came up behind him, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Ready for another long day, Arav?" Arav smiled faintly. "Always." "Good," Rajesh said, nodding approvingly. "You've come a long way, kid. The others talk about you, you know. They say you never hesitate anymore." Arav looked away, the faintest smile touching his lips. "That's not true," he said quietly. "I still feel afraid sometimes." Rajesh chuckled. "That's what makes you human. The trick isn't to erase fear, it's to walk beside it." Before Arav could respond, the siren blared from inside the building. The calm morning shattered in an instant. One of the coordinators shouted from the radio desk, "Landslide in Bhavan Valley, multiple people trapped. All units, move out." The team sprang into action. Arav and Rajesh grabbed their gear, helmets, ropes, first aid kits, and jumped into the rescue truck. The siren wailed as they sped down the mountain road, dust rising behind them. Arav's hands tightened around his harness. The familiar unease crept up his spine, but he focused on breathing, steady and slow. He could almost hear his mother's voice again, softer this time, "Face the world, Arav." As they reached the valley, the devastation came into view. The landslide had swallowed half the slope, trees uprooted, rocks scattered like broken bones, and mud sliding down into the river below. A few houses had been crushed under the debris. Villagers stood nearby, shouting, pointing toward the ruins. The cries of trapped voices echoed faintly beneath the rubble. Rajesh jumped out first, barking instructions. "We need to clear a path. Arav, take your team to the right side, there's movement under that collapsed roof." Arav nodded, grabbing his shovel and leading 2 volunteers to the spot. The roof had caved in, and beneath it came a faint, muffled sob. He dropped to his knees, calling out, "Can you hear me?" A weak voice answered, "We're here. Please help us." He recognized the desperation, the same fear he had once felt. Without wasting another second, he began digging. Mud clung to his gloves, heavy and wet, but he didn't stop. The others joined in, shoveling, moving broken beams aside, piece by piece. Sweat mixed with rainwater on his face, his muscles burned, but he kept going. After nearly half an hour, they reached the hollow space beneath the collapsed structure. Inside were a man, a woman, and 2 children, covered in dirt, trembling but alive. Arav's breath caught for a moment. The boy's eyes met his, wide and filled with tears, just like the girl's had been that night on the bus. "It's okay," Arav said gently, extending his hand. "You're safe now." They pulled the family out one by one, wrapping them in blankets as the medical team rushed over. The mother broke down crying, clutching her children to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Arav nodded silently, his throat too tight to speak. He stepped back, letting the professionals take over. The sound of crying and shouting faded for a moment, replaced by the rush of wind through the broken trees. He stood there, staring at his muddy hands, realizing they no longer trembled. By the time the rescue ended, evening had fallen. The sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of crimson and orange. The team sat together on the edge of the hill, exhausted and covered in grime. A few villagers brought them tea, steaming in tin cups. Arav sipped his slowly, staring at the fading light. Rajesh sat beside him, wiping his brow. "You did good today," he said. Arav shrugged lightly. "It wasn't just me." "No," Rajesh said with a nod, "but it started with you. You didn't freeze. You didn't run." Arav smiled faintly. "I used to think courage was something people were born with. But I think, maybe it's something you find when life leaves you no choice." Rajesh laughed softly. "You're learning faster than most." They sat in silence for a while, watching the smoke rise from the village below. Somewhere, a child laughed, a clear, sweet sound cutting through the tired quiet. Arav thought again of the little girl from the bus, the way her small hand had reached out through the darkness, and how that moment had changed everything. He had gone from being the one who needed saving to the one who could save. When Arav returned home that night, his mother was waiting by the door, her eyes tired but warm. "I saw the news," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "They said you helped save a family." He smiled softly, removing his muddy boots. "We all did." She stepped forward and hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. For the first time, he didn't deflect her praise or hide behind shyness. He simply held her back, understanding now that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to stand up in spite of it. Later that night, lying in bed, Arav stared at the ceiling. Outside, the crickets sang, and the world felt peaceful. His body ached from the day's work, but his heart was light. He realized that fear had once been his prison, but now, it was his teacher. It had pushed him to grow, to rise, to see himself differently. As sleep began to claim him, he thought about all the people out there still trapped in their own fears, afraid to act, to change, to take the first step. He wished he could tell them what he had learned, that bravery isn't born in comfort, it's forged in moments when everything falls apart. He had been thrown into fear once, violently and without warning. But in that chaos, he had discovered something powerful. Courage was not beyond him. It had always been inside, waiting for the moment he would stop running and start believing. And as the night deepened, Arav slept with the faintest of smiles, knowing that he had finally become the person he was meant to be, a symbol of quiet strength, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, courage can rise and change everything.